Hey warrior, and welcome back to the course. Thanks so much for joining me. In today's lesson, or this evening's, whenever you're watching, we're going to cover how meditation helps our stress response. Now, the stress response is one of the greatest ways to debilitate ourselves, especially when dealing with the stress of an endo flare-up, or the fear that one could come on suddenly. But first, it's important to know that when we meditate, we're increasing blood flow to key areas of our brain, including the hippocampus, our memory powerhouse, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the newest part of our brain and is responsible for executive functioning, such as decision-making, logic, reasoning, problem-solving, attentional control, and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex is often referred to as the watchtower, since it's where all of our mindful observation goes. All of this good blood flow to these key areas in the brain is neuroplasticity at its finest, which is strengthening the neural pathways to those key parts of the brain, making logic, emotional control, and reasoning more of our default to managing any situation in our body or environment. In addition to increasing neural pathways in various areas of the brain, there's an uncontested reduction in the size of our amygdala, and this result is very important for those with endometriosis. So what exactly is the amygdala that we speak of? Well, despite being the size of an almond, but definitely not as delicious, the amygdala isn't anything to squawk at. As it sits in the middle of your brain as part of the bigger emotional machine known as the limbic system, the amygdala's main role is to keep you alive, going so far as to put you into fight or flight if it feels the threat is big enough, though it can get it pretty wrong sometimes. Pretty wrong. It's the oldest part of your brain and doesn't always get the threat right or accurate. It's a bit dumb. It'll often set off your smoke alarm when there's nothing even on the stove. This is especially relevant for those with endometriosis, as there are always a lot of threats that can put the smoke alarm into overdrive, which is something we'll cover in gross detail in the lesson on pain. Now, one key reason to be hopeful about our amygdala's shortcomings is the power of mindfulness and meditation to shrink it. This helps ensure the prefrontal cortex becomes our default, providing context to the brain's unconscious reactions from the amygdala, allowing us to avoid extreme panic before it takes hold. Now, many of us who have not strengthened the neural pathways to the prefrontal cortex to reduce the likelihood of, stress and panic, can probably relate to how quickly that amygdala can run rampant on us. Again, this goes well beyond the endometriosis pain experience. A classic example of this, and one I relate to beyond belief, is exam or test anxiety. We study so damn hard for weeks. Well, sometimes. But once we sit down under the stressful conditions of test taking, we draw a proverbial and literal blank. This response perfectly speaks to how hard it is to enable the prefrontal cortex, our emotional regulation and logic, and our hippocampus, our memory powerhouse, where all of that studying went to, in the midst of an aggressive stress response, like panic. When we panic or get really stressed, for instance, if we're in the middle of a stressful exam, our prefrontal cortex and our hippocampus go offline to prioritize the body's threat response from the amygdala, commonly known as fight or flight, and freeze and fawn as well. The blood flow required for these exam-necessary areas to function is no longer viewed as essential. Instead, in response to the stressor, the body releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, triggering a physical reaction so that we run away from the threat or we go ahead and fight the bugger. This often causes our breathing to become faster and more shallow as the body attempts to take in extra oxygen. Our heart rate also rises, is that where my heart is? Pumping oxygen-rich blood to the muscles in preparation for action. Additionally, our palms may sweat as the increased blood flow warms the body, getting us ready for that fight or flight response. All of this starts to happen because our brain has clocked a literal threat, which back in the day would provide life-saving innate responses to our hunter-gatherer ancestors to run from that tiger in the bushes. But today, however, it's the aggressive email from Jeff in finance or the 4-part essay exam that triggers the almond to make us feel like jumping out of our own skeleton. Now, as you've probably gathered by this point, this is precisely what is happening in your body in the midst of an aggressive pain flare-up. Our emotional regulation, the prefrontal cortex, can quickly go offline, making us even more vulnerable when trying to cope against the insurmountable odds of an aggressive pain flare. It is truly unfair. And while it can be a chicken and egg scenario, did the pain trigger fight or flight, or did fight or flight trigger the pain? The result is always the same: excruciating, debilitating pain made even worse by the muscle tension and emotional dysregulation that inevitably follows the body's threat response. Thanks, amygdala. So how do mindfulness and meditation have any sort of shot at destabilizing our body's most innate and hardwired response for survival? Well, the answer lies not only in the mental acuity we develop from meditating, such as a thicker prefrontal cortex for better emotional regulation, but also in the brain-body connection, also referred to as the gut-brain axis, that mindfulness and meditation help foster positive associations with. The vagus nerve is at the heart of this connection and is one of the greatest lifelines we have in reaching a state of homeostasis after our body plunges into fight or flight. It's an integral part of the autonomic nervous system, a part of our overall nervous system that's responsible for key unconscious functions like breathing and digestion. The autonomic nervous system is broken down by key divisions, including the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. While fight or flight is triggered by our sympathetic nervous system, which gets our body physically ready for danger, the ability to regulate and reach a state of calm and relaxation is managed by the parasympathetic nervous system, commonly known as rest and digest, since it prioritizes non-survival mode necessities like eating, digestion, and sleeping. Vagus nerve stimulation is crucially needed in order to return to a relaxed state after panic or stress ensues. And meditation and mindfulness are the keys to unlocking its power in the biggest way: the breath. You can stimulate the vagus nerve through other methods too, including humming, gargling, cold exposure, laughing, or my personal favorite, singing. Remember that stressful exam we took earlier and how one of the first physiological responses from our body was to make our breathing more shallow to prepare to run out of that lecture hall? Well, this involuntary reaction of shallow breathing shuts down the vagus nerve, limiting its ability to regulate us, including our lungs and our abdomen. Deep breathing through meditation or mindfulness is the fail-safe to get it back online. When we breathe deeply, we're activating the vagus nerve, simulating safety within the body, acting as a form of respiratory biofeedback. Slow breathing with extended exhalations signals relaxation through the vagus nerve, increasing its activity and promoting deeper relaxation, even in spite of active threats in our environment that may still be present, allowing it to overcome even the worst pain possible in some situations. In the next video, we'll cover the benefits of meditation and learn how to do a breathwork meditation to help calm down that dang amygdala. Can't wait to see you there. Thanks so much for watching, Warrior.